welcome back to Learn Economia. In this video, we are going to see certain statistical tests. Specifically, this video would discuss t-test, f-test and z-test. Before understanding in detail each of these tests, let's understand why do we go for testing. When we say testing in statistics, we mean hypothesis testing. This is basically used to determine whether a predictor variable has a statistically significant relationship with the outcome variable. So we'll be having two types of variable, the dependent variable and independent variable, or the predictor variable and the outcome variable, etc. Right. So we are going to see the relationship between two variables. In this way, we are going to see whether there is any kind of significant relationship of one variable with the other variable. These kinds of different tests are used to estimate the difference between two or more groups. And also, in this case, we have to understand the difference between the null hypothesis and alternative hypothesis. In the case of null hypothesis, we assume that there is no relationship or there is no difference between the groups. And here we determine whether the observed data fall outside of the range of values predicted by the null hypothesis. So what is a statistical test to, whether it is a f-test or z-test or t-test? So we have to understand what is common with respect to each of these tests. We can understand that these tests work by calculating a test statistic. A test statistic is actually a number which would describe how much the relationship between the variables in your test differs from the null hypothesis of no relationship. That means that null hypothesis assumes that there exists no relationship. In this case, we have to see how much the relationship between the variable in your test differs from the null hypothesis of no relationship. Okay. For that, we have to calculate the p-value, that is a probability value, which would estimate how likely it is that you would see the difference described by the test statistic if the null hypothesis is of no relationship were true. Okay. So, if the test statistic is more extreme than the statistic calculated from the null hypothesis, then we can infer that there exists a statistically significant relationship between the predicted variable and the outcome variable. Okay, and if the value of the test statistic, on the other hand, if it is less extreme than the one calculated from the null hypothesis, then you can infer that there exists no statistically significant relationship between the predicted variable and the outcome variable. Okay. Now, coming specifically to t-statistic or the t-statistic or the t-test. Okay, this is a inferential kind of statistic which is used to determine if there is a significant difference between the means of two groups. You will be having two groups and you are looking at the means of these two groups and you are trying to see whether there exists any kind of difference between these two groups. Okay. And these kinds of tests are used with the data like the one recorded as outcome from flipping a coin, and this is basically following a kind of normal distribution. So this is one of the assumptions of t-test, and t-test is used for hypothesis testing as in the case of other tests which we will be discussing in this video. And here we'll be having a t statistic, t distribution values, degrees of freedom, etc. to determine the statistical significance. Coming to the details of t-test, we can see that this test allows us to compare the average values of the two data sets, and this would be helping us to determine if they come from the same population or not. If you take the case of certain examples, you will be able to find that the sample of students of class A and sample of students from class B. Okay, you are actually comparing these two students, and you will be able to see whether there is same mean and standard deviation or not. Similarly, samples taken from the some other population and with respect to some other criteria, and sample selected from some other population. I mean, you are taking the two different samples selected from the same population or different population, and you are trying to see whether the mean and the standard deviation of these two things are different or not. Mathematically, the t-test, it takes a sample from each of the two sets and it tries to establish the problem statement by assuming that a null hypothesis that the two means are equal. This is a null hypothesis. We assume that the two means are equal. That is a null hypothesis. Okay. And if the null hypothesis qualifies to be rejected, it indicates that the data readings are very strong and are probably not due to chance. There exists a relationship. Okay, and the t-test is one of the tests used for this purpose. We will be discussing the other tests as well in this video. For a large sample size, we cannot use t-test. So in that case, instead of using t-test, what we do is that we go for result test. We will be telling about that in detail in this video itself towards the last part. Okay, with that we are moving to the assumptions of t-test. A t-test can be conducted by following certain assumptions only. First of all, you have to see that the measurement applied to the data collected follows a continuous or ordinal scale. And also we have to assume that there is a simple random sample and the data collected is representative of the population. This is very much important, otherwise there will be biasness. So you have to be very sure that the data collected is from a representative sample of the population. Then now if you plot the data, you should get a normal distribution or a bell-shaped distribution curve, and there should not be any heterogeneity of variance. Homogeneity of variance is another assumption with respect to this test. How can we calculate t-test, which is one of the important questions asked by many people? First of all, you have to have three different data values. This include difference between mean values from the data set, which is also known as a mean difference. Then you should have the standard deviation of each group, and also you should have the number of data values of each group. With this, you are going for the t-value. Okay, the calculated t-value is then compared against the value obtained from the critical value, which is known as the table value. Okay, you are comparing your calculated value with the table value. So this comparison is the key to our conclusion. This comparison would help us to determine the effect of change alone on difference and whether the difference is outside that the chance range. T-test questions whether the difference between the groups represents a true difference in the study or is it something which occurred by chance. Now you are having two scores. First of all, you will be having the table value, then you have the calculated value, right? At large t-score, it tells that the groups are different, and a small t-score tells that the groups are similar. Now we have to see whether your probability value is something which is above or below your yeah, it is above or below 0.5%, point 0 sorry 0.05, that is whether it is high or low than 5%. Low p values are considered to be very good in the sense that this is something which indicates your data did not occur by chance. There exists a clear-cut relationship between the predictor value and the outcome variable, or the predictor variable and the outcome variable. Okay, in most of the cases we have to see that a p-value of 0.05 is accepted to mean that the data is valid. Now you compare your table value with your calculated value. The calculated value, if it is greater than the table value, then you have to understand that we can reject the null hypothesis. That means that there is no difference between the means. That means here your p-value is less than the alpha. That is, it is less than 0.05. So in this case, you can reject the null hypothesis and you can say that there is exists no so your null hypothesis is there is no difference between the means. So here you are rejecting it. That means that there exists a difference, right? There exists a difference. Since you are rejecting your null hypothesis, it means so. Now, having said that, we are going to the next test, that is F-test. This is something which is used by many studies. In most of the cases, when people talk about this particular test, what they mean is that the F test to compare the two variances. This statistic is actually a variety of, it comes under the different varieties of tests, which include regression analysis, short test, etc. What are the steps involved for running a F test? So as in the case of T test, you will be having two different values here, your F value, which is your calculated value, and your table value. Okay, table value of the F statistic. Now we are comparing your F statistic with the table value. Based on this comparison, you can either support or you can reject the null hypothesis. If the table value is smaller than the calculated value, then you can reject the null hypothesis. Okay. So with that, we move on the last test which we are going to discuss in this video, that is the Z test. This too is a statistical technique which is used to determine whether the population means are different when the variances are known and the sample size is very large. This statistic, it is considered to have a normal distribution. It is considered to follow a normal distribution. So we have to see that as in the case of the other two types of tests, here also we should have two different values, your table value and the calculated value, to see that whether your table value is more or less than your calculated value. That means that you are going for a comparison. Here, if the test statistic is something which is high or low than the table value, then you will be either supporting or rejecting the null hypothesis. So if the calculated is a score, if it is larger, then you can say that you are going to reject the null hypothesis. Okay, so we can reject the null hypothesis in this case. I hope you could understand the three different tests that we have discussed in this video. Uh, so I request you to like, share and subscribe to this channel. I invite you to my Telegram group and Telegram channel to make discussions. I'll be providing the links of the same in the description box. With that, thank you.